Hi, I'm Matt. I'm a Swiss photographer and videographer, and today I want to show you how I use the Dehancer plugin for my color grading, but also for monitoring while shooting like I'm doing it right now. So some time has passed. I had to move to a different location because of rain and too much wind. And it's almost 8 p.m. I filmed the intro like 5 hours ago. And yeah, let's get to the editing part. I got my mobile office right here and let's jump right into it. So now we're all set up and can't go without a mouse. Anyways, so we're in Premiere. The workflow is kind of the same over all the other editing softwares like DaVinci or Final Cut. I believe in DaVinci you would use a node instead of a adjustment layer like I do it here in Premiere. So yeah, let's jump into it and do a sample edit. So here we are in Premiere, and as you can see right here, I got my timeline with all the adjustment layers and the footage. And we're gonna take this clip right here for a quick sample edit or sample color grade. And you see I've got my adjustment layer. I don't edit directly onto the clip because like this I'm much quicker when it comes to finalizing the edit. I can just drag the adjustment layer over onto another clip. Yeah, that just makes it a bit quicker than copying the effect from each clip to another. So as you can see, we have the flat color profile. I shoot everything in S-Log 3 and S-Gamut 3. So we have our clip right here, and then we can just grab a adjustment layer on top of it. Let's just make this smaller. And if we search for Dehancer in the effects, we can just double click it and it applies it to our adjustment layer and the clip underneath. So then we go to effect controls, and here we have all the effects. So first we're gonna choose our camera, which is the Sony ZV-E1. Currently filming on this right here. And as I said, it's the S-Gamut 3. And then we have those basic adjustments right here, like exposure, temperature, and all that kind of stuff. But first, I always jump right down to film because that is the most impactful setting, I guess, on the footage. So if you're dialing in your settings up here and then choose another film, it's gonna mess up the whole edit and you have to redo this again. So I'm starting with the film and I'm gonna choose Kodak Vision 50D. You can also just scroll through here until you find something you like. Looks a bit crazy sometimes, but I mostly go with 50D like this. And after that, I will go down here and enable Film Developer and give in a bit of contrast because that also brings out a lot of the colors. So maybe like this. can also turn on the scopes right here. So now that we can see our colors, we then can dial in the temperatures. I usually like to warm it up a bit, maybe also give it some color boost to make those color pop a bit more. Maybe even take out a bit of the greens. To the left or to the minus is more greenish, and to the right or plus side is more purple magenta. So I'm gonna give it a bit more to that side because the grass is already pretty green. So I'm trying to compensate for that. After that, we then come down to gamma, and I sometimes like to take it down a notch because I tend to overexpose with the Sony a lot of the times, or maybe I just like the kind of muted look. So then if we come down here to film compression and turn this on, you can see what it's doing here in the highlights. You can also see it in the scopes right here. If we turn it on and off, it's kind of bringing down the highlights, like how it behaves in analog film, where you usually don't have pure white. So this is for that. You can pump up the impact to max or lower it. Let's just leave it there. I usually like to keep it around the default settings. I might just tweak it a little bit, but for most part, I leave it like that. Then with expand, you can target the black and the white point separately. Kind of like if you're pumping up the contrast, you're pulling the whites and the blacks apart from each other. Here you, of course, you're also targeting the colors. So not only luminance or contrast in luminance, but also in colors. So you're also applying color contrast. And here you can target the blacks and the whites. Let's just put us back like that. So I found that if I pump the contrast with the contrast slider up here, it tends to crush the blacks and almost like give it some banding in the blacks or in the darker gradients. So I like to take back a bit of the contrast, or maybe even more, and just give it back with the black point and the white point. Here again, if you pump it that much, you're counteracting the whole film compression. I also keep an eye on the scopes, but I also don't mind if there's some pure white spots or maybe even more pure black spots. I'm not afraid of that. I know that there's some rules to color grading and cinematography and all that, but I also think that you don't always have to create an image how we perceive our surroundings with our eyes, because I think the beauty of photography and also videography is to create images that we can't see with our own eyes. So I don't know. I guess that's some part of it, but it also has to look nice, of course. And if you, for example, push the color boost like that, it's not gonna look good. But yeah, that's just some thoughts on that one. Like I said, I'm not afraid of pure blacks or even pure whites, even if pure whites shouldn't be present in analog film or in a film simulation like I do here. So yeah, just bring it back like that. Speaking of film, we then have down here film grain, which is probably overused and can look weird if it doesn't fit the image. But yeah, I usually like to really take it down to 65mm film, ISO 250, and then from there, because it applies that preset onto the footage, and then I can go in and do some custom settings. And I usually like to even take down the film resolution to 70 or maybe even 60%, because I think the ZVE1 with a 2470 2.8 G Master 2 looks a bit too sharp for my taste, just my opinion. So I then just bring down the film resolution even more. Usually, if there's already a lot of contrast or contrasty edges in the frame, like here, for example, with the door and the railing of the roof rack. And last but not least, halation. If we enable it, it just looks too, let's just make it bigger here. It just looks too much, in my opinion. We also bring it down and maybe even go in here and take down the impact a good amount. So it just adds a little bit of that film aesthetic again, which is probably overused as well, but I kind of like it. And that's it. So most of the time I like to just go through one more time, maybe even give it back a bit more of the contrast or a bit more color boost. That looks weird. Maybe like that. And maybe even take down the blacks a bit more, because I don't need details in here. I don't think it's necessary. So I'll just pump up the contrast a bit more. And I think now it looks pretty good and I'm pretty happy with it. So one thing to keep in mind is the skin tones. With this tool, you cannot target the skin tones separately. So what I do is I go into the lumetri colors. So I would just pick the skin tones, maybe turn on the layer. And then, very important, you need to drag the Dehancer effect underneath the lumetri color effect, because otherwise the lumetri effect doesn't have that much impact. If we go in here, then turn on the mask. We're just gonna do it pretty rough right now. Just take this. I would normally also create a mask around the subject so that we don't have all this stuff around here as well. So for demonstration purposes, we're gonna leave it as this right now, and then we can turn it off, and now we can shift the skin tones maybe to the warmer side, or a lot of the times more to the magenta. I can also show you why I put the effect above and not underneath, because if we do it now like this and go back, you can see it doesn't affect the skin tones that much. It somehow affects all the other parts of the image more, but we don't need this right here. And once we're happy, we can then go to the LUT generator and hit export LUT, and then load it onto an SD card, put it in the camera, and load it onto the camera. I put the setting in my quick menu, so I can just toggle through the different LUTs while I'm on a shoot. And like this, I'm able to see what I get, and it makes the whole process of editing and color grading a lot quicker because I already shot the footage how I think it's gonna turn out in the edit. And then I also usually like to just have a adjustment layer like this one ready in a different sequence, and like this I can just drag it into the next sequence and have it ready. Just do some minor adjustments and then I'm done. So it makes the whole process, for me at least, a lot quicker. And I also really like to see how the image is gonna look like while I'm shooting. So it just it's so it's also more fun than just looking at a super flat S-log picture. One thing to note is if you pull down the exposure on the LUT right here and you then generate a LUT for the camera, you will overexpose your footage because the LUT you generated is underexposed. So you just have to keep in mind that setting when exporting this LUT, also for the gamma compensation, of course. Also the other way around, if you pull up the exposure and then export the LUT, put it in your camera and film with this LUT, you're gonna underexpose because you're always seeing a brighter image with that LUT than it really is. So you're gonna drag down your exposure in camera and you're gonna end up with an underexposed image. So that's just one thing to keep in mind, to reset those settings like gamma compensation and exposure before exporting a LUT for monitoring. So I hope this video maybe helps some of you and gives you a bit of an insight into my workflow. And I'm gonna be at a concert gig shoot at a festival next week, exactly 1 week from now. I'm gonna be doing a video on that one, and otherwise I'll catch you in the next one.